Fact or fiction,
Fact
Nick?
or fiction. So Nick's going to read us a declarative statement, and we're going to determine whether it's Husker fact or Husker fiction.
Nick, take it away.
It's your choice. Dealer chooses. You pick whichever.
Yeah, you can alternate between us.
Doesn't matter.
You can read them in reverse order. You can do whatever you want.
Fact or fiction?
Mm.
Nebraska's inconsistency on defense will be consistent.
Nebraska's inconsistency on defense. Now, perhaps one could argue that Nebraska was only really inconsistent in one game.
What about the Northern Iowa game?
And this is why I'm making the argument.
This is why you are being fact or fiction.
I don't think Nebraska defensively played that poorly against Northern Iowa. Just Northern Iowa was able to convert just enough third downs.
Yes.
And just to keep it annoying. But it's not like they, went absolutely crazy and racked up all these rushing yards. Yes, there were some. And I suppose if you really want to, drill down a little bit, the tackling issues
definitely
that some people thought were a big problem could be in that realm of inconsistent. How, as the one who authored this question, how do you see it?
So I think that the answer to this is fact. I think that how they have played in some of the games, and I would say games 1, 2, and 5, I would say was that of the defense we expected them to be, causing havoc, getting to the quarterback, getting a bunch of their sacks. They did that. And then the other games, I think, is a sign of what could happen against teams like Indiana, for example. Certainly Ohio State is going to give them troubles. And I think USC could as well. So I don't think that, like last year, and we'll have the Stumanji stats in a little bit, and I can't wait to get into them, because one of the things that jumped out to me when I was looking at it is actually that the defense got a lot better as the season went along. And so how we remember them is how they finished the season. I don't think that this group is going to be as consistent as they were the back half of last year. So I think the answer to this is fact. I think their inconsistency will be a constant. And so it's just figuring out, do they take a step back in the obvious games, or is it in different matchups?
Well, here's how I would tend to agree and say that it is fact, but I think it's going to be based on the opponent.
Yes.
I mean, you mentioned, games 1, 2, and 5, they were really good, and games 3 and 4, not as much. Well, games 1, 2, and 5, very favorable matchups.
Correct.
Northern Iowa being an exception, and I still argue I didn't think Nebraska played that poorly on defense, but Illinois,
bad.
To Robin's point,
yes,
was easily the best team on the schedule so far. Well, when you look down the ledger, and Rutgers is going to be interesting because this will be a team that's ground predicated. Indiana, great passing attack. Ohio State can do everything. UCLA,
yeah. But USC having a good year.
So I think it will seem inconsistent because the quality of the opposition is going to be up.
Not a bad answer.
So, yeah, I will say to this answer that is Husker fact.
Fact or fiction? Dylan Raiola is overachieving in his first year.
Fact from young Dylan. And here is why, John. I think it is the lack of turning the ball over. And on top of that, I would add it is the low number of turnover-worthy plays. I think it's one thing to put together a highlight reel of throws. He has certainly done that. I think it's another thing to not have takeaways or not throw a bunch of interceptions. He has done that, but the 2 interceptions so far, in my opinion, were his receiver's fault. Other than that, I can only think of a few passes this year where he put the ball in harm's way that maybe it could have resulted in a takeaway by the defense. He has the 2 fumbles on, one play, and then they ran another play, and then he fumbled again. So on 3 plays, he had 2 fumbles. Otherwise, he has been very clean with the football. His ability to layer it over the entire defense is, it's magical. It is so much fun to watch, and especially seeing it in person. His completion percentage is at 70%. And I feel like, John, that there's some meat left on that bone in terms of when he figures out the deep ball to his exact liking. I think that could be really good for him. He's good in the pocket. He's able to move well. I thought that he would be good. I think that he is better than I expected. I give this a big stamp of fact approval.
I give this a big stamp of fiction.
Wow, who's the idiot now?
Well, let's just look at the raw numbers, shall we?
Okay.
The raw numbers right now have Dylan on a pace to be between 2,930 or 3,000 yards. He is on pace to throw 22 touchdowns and in the neighborhood of 6 interceptions.
Yeah, 5 to 6 interceptions.
His completion percentage as of right now is at 70%, so maybe a little bit higher than you would have thought. But
Definitely.
honestly, when I look back at the predictions we made at the beginning of the season,
Are they
that's
right on
about
point?
where we had him, somewhere between 2,900 and 3,000 yards, 20 to 25 touchdowns. Each only had him only down for 8 interceptions for the season.
Yeah.
The turnover-worthy plays, certainly interesting. I didn't really think of it at the beginning of the season in terms of turnover-worthy plays.
Yeah.
But to be honest with you, Dylan is performing based on where we had projected him, basically right where he is. So I don't think he is overachieving. I think he's achieving about...
He's underachieving, says John Bishop. Nick, make a graphic.
No, he's just achieving. He's right on pace with where we had him. Now, some might look back and say, well, maybe you guys overshot the moon. I don't think we did.
Well, no, given that he's on pace for that, we definitely didn't overshoot the moon.
I don't think we overshot it at all. So to answer this question literally from the expectations I put on him at the beginning of the season, he is right on pace with where he should be. He is achieving.
Get the rope.
But he is not under or overachieving.
Okay.
So fiction.
And look, real quick, so did you get this idea from this graphic that you put on the screen?
Yes, this was Joel Klatt. And he was talking about Dylan and Jeremiah Smith at Ohio State and Ryan Williams, the talented wide receiver at Alabama. And his quote was, they all came in with 5 stars and somehow they're still overachieving.
And John says, Joel Klatt, you're an idiot. Don't ever come on our show. That's what you said.
I don't think so. Now, if we could, if we wanted to at some point and really drill down, and we don't have time for it necessarily right now. But when you look at where he is compared to other 5 stars, Jed did all that research for us in the summertime.
In terms of non-national championship teams, dare I say he is having the best of any of that data that we looked at.
Correct.
Because that was the one thing that kind of gave me pause. It was like, man, he just isn't going to have the talent level around him that the other guys, Jalen Hurts and Trevor Lawrence specifically, that they had. He is having the most success of anybody that's not on a national title contender.
Fact or fiction? Nebraska will have a first-team all-conference player.
Fact.
Oh, who's it going to be? Are you a Bullock man?
I think John Bullock will be a first-team all-conference selection. Unfortunately, unless Nebraska darn near wins out, Dylan's not going to be the number 1 quarterback.
He's going to be in the mix, I think.
He'll be in the conversation, but at the end of the day, it's kind of like the Heisman. They'll default to, probably Kyle McCord if it's Ohio State, or it's Dylan Gabriel.
You mean Will Howard
or Will Howard?
Yeah.
Kyle McCord.
Yeah.
Dylan Howard. Dylan Howard. Ryan Howard.
Will Howard.
Who cares? One of the Howards. Howard Cunningham. Who cares?
I think it actually be Curtis Rourke, but that's neither here nor
there. Well, it could, but it could also be
Dylan's 4th in passing yards. By
Gabriel
at Oregon. Yes.
At Oregon.
Yeah. You want to guess his first name?
Because a lot. Roman Gabriel.
Roman Reigns.
So I don't know if it's going to be him. I doubt it's going to be him.
Yeah, I would agree.
Trying to think of other possible candidates. I mean, certainly Ty Robinson was trending in that direction and still can.
Need some more splash plays.
Right. See, one of the problems with this is a lot of times when the folks vote, they're looking at it from, hey, there's a reason why Ohio State gets more on the team. And I'm not saying they shouldn't.
Yeah.
But it's not like people are really drilling down. And it's going to be harder to make first team all conference because you've added 4 more teams.
That's true.
So, you just got more players to choose from. But I do think Nebraska will get one, and Bullock certainly is one of the strongest candidates right now to get that.
I will say fiction, and I will say fiction mainly because of the stuff that you said towards the end of that answer. It's very difficult, and you have to be on one of those teams. Bullock has been, a really good player for Nebraska, but to get on the first team, he would have to put together some monster numbers, and I just don't know if he's going to do that conference-wide to be recognized by the voters. So I will say fiction. Honestly, I'll go back to the first player we talked about after him. I think the best chance would be Raiola. He'd have to put together a spectacular second half. He's only 200-ish yards behind Billy Edwards Jr., who leads the conference in passing yards. He is near the top in terms of yards per attempt. His touchdown interception ratio is really good. If he were to get a nice pellet on the wall, I think that he'd have a chance, but he'd have to really put together a great second half. I think it'll come down to the guys that we mentioned, Dylan Gabriel, Curtis Rourke. I'll be honest, I don't know if Will Howard will be in the mix just because I don't know if his numbers are going to be good enough.
Real facts or bull fiction? Will again finish his season saying, I wish they would have involved the tight ends more.
This is fact to the nth degree. The tight ends right now for Nebraska have not done a whole lot. The leading pass catcher from that position is Thomas Fidone. He has 12 catches for 119 yards, the stats that I'm looking at right now. That is fifth most receptions. Carter Nelson is technically a wide receiver now, so we don't even count him. And after that, I mean,
Borkacher and Lindenmeyer each have one catch.
Yeah, and I forget do we count Janiron Bonner as a receiver? I don't remember.
He's a receiver.
Okay, I don't remember what we count him as anymore.
He's a receiver.
Barring like a total change to how they target Fidone moving forward and his impact, I think we're going to leave saying the same thing that we always do. And that's like, man, can they get the tight end more? And it will be a talking point going into the 2025 season.
I'm going to say fiction because if Dylan continues at this pace and the passing offense looks as it does, you can only give the ball to so many people. Keep in mind, the running backs are a bigger part of the passing game than in recent years. Ramirez already got 13 catches. Emmett's got 7 catches. Dowdell just has a couple. But you've got more weapons across the field. I think it was more of a glaring omission when Nebraska didn't have, as many great players on the edge. And
the tight ends were solid.
And it seemed like, wow, we've missed out on this opportunity because they didn't have great playmakers outside. Well, not only did you bring in 2 transfers who have become really good receivers, this Barney kid has risen up the depth chart in a hurry as a true freshman and is now basically an X factor for your team. He's your
X factor.
He's a gadget player.
Yeah,
where you can use him in a lot of different circumstances and get him the ball in different spots. So I don't think we will lament as much this year if the tight end receiving numbers don't go up, because the receiving numbers, it's just, the wealth is being spread out over a lot of other places, and the passing game, we hope, won't be struggling.
We hope so, indeed.
So fiction.
Facts of life or pulp fiction? These next 2 games will determine the fate of the season.
Nice way to save this one towards the end, Nick. Very meaty question.
Thank you.
Fact. Because how they play in these games is going to shape a lot of opinion. And you're talking about 2 programs who are in a similar boat to Nebraska. They're all in the rebuilding boys boat. Nice. The rebuilding boys.
Nice.
Right? And Indiana has been on this rocket ship as of late, whereas Rutgers has been more like, the consistent, 18-wheeler just trucking down the road. But these games are setting the table for what we thought before the season was the tough stretch drive.
Yeah.
Right? Starting with Ohio State and, traditional rivals, Wisconsin and Iowa and USC.
And UCLA.
Nobody cares. But these games, I think, will, even if it's 1-1, even if it's a 1-1, how they play in these games, how they look in these games is going to set a lot of expectations for what they do in the Final Five when the schedule theoretically is supposed to be tougher. But I think, honestly, you look at these teams, if you just look at the toughest teams left on the schedule starting today, Ohio State is obviously number one. USC right now appears to be number two.
Ahead of Indiana?
You can make the argument for Iowa or Indiana.
Go Hawks.
Right?
Yep.
And then Rutgers is right there. Just a notch below. There's a lot of good quality teams left on the schedule. So I think it is fact that these games will help set the narrative and help determine if they go 0-2 in these games, it's going to feel really the last half of the season is going to feel a lot like last year.
Yep, going to be scratching and clawing to get into a bowl game.
Correct.
Yeah, this is a unequivocal fact in my mind. If you go 2-0, first of all, you're at 6 wins before the Ohio State game, so you've locked up the bowl eligibility before November's even arrived. You're feeling great. If you go 1-1, you're going to finish the month most likely at 5-3, which is interestingly enough the same record they had last year going into the final stretch of games. But I think you feel better about this team versus last year's team. If you go 0-2, then get ready to light things on fire. It's going to be bad around here. These 2 games will control everything else that comes.
Fact or fiction? A facet of special teams other than place kicking will cost the Huskers a game this season.
I will also say fact for this one, and the thing that I'm looking out for, John, is the return game. We saw Colorado break one free, set up a good field position on a drive that resulted in going 4 and out, but they still were deep in Nebraska territory. One of the touchdown drives that Illinois had began with a punt return at the 6 or 7 yard line, and they've completely flipped the field. They scored on that drive. They, of course, won that game in overtime. I will go fact because special teams has been so bad away from kicking. It is why special teams overall, according to SP Plus, is in the 130s. It's not just about the kickers. It is about everything. Fact.
Sadly, I am also going to go fact. And part of this is I look ahead, especially to a couple of teams left on this schedule, especially Iowa, who drills special teams and has always had excellent special teams and have probably even more emphasized special teams recently, given their offensive struggles. Sadly, I think it is a fact. I am worried that the net punting, it's been a concern since the start of the season. And getting that straightened away. Thankfully, Nebraska hasn't had a kickoff returned against them yet, but you're not getting a lot of kicks boomed into the end zone at this point. And with the wind expected to come up this weekend and others, there could be an opportunity in the kickoff return game for an opposing team. And unfortunately, I haven't seen, Nebraska punt return wise,
they're catching the ball, man.
It's better than it used to be.
100%.
But it was also a very, very, very low bar to clear. So, I can't say that's going to be a difference maker in any sense. So sadly, I believe that this is fact, that there will be another special teams, non-place kicking special teams moment that will loom large in a fateful game this year.
How about this? A bonus factor fiction from Theo. The media hypes Lloyd's speed because of West Side bias. John, fact or fiction?
I don't have any West Side bias.
Oh, but you're a part of the media. You definitely do.
I don't have any West Side bias.
I'm going to argue with
you. I don't understand that point. Is there...
That's why we call you West Side John. Everybody calls you West Side John.
West Side.
They've been the best high school football.
I think it's because you're friends with Damon Benning. I think it's because of that. Mute that, please, Nick. He coaches.
Damon never says anything about, hey, you need to hype up the boys over at
Hard
West
to argue.
Side.
Fact, Theo. You got us. You got me.
And what difference does it make if Jalen Lloyd played at West Side or he played at Fremont Bergen?
You wouldn't talk about him if he played at Fremont. Well, you would.
His
shut
speed,
up about
his
it.
speed is his speed. He has speed.
You're saying he's faster than he is because he went to West Side. I knew
All
it.
I need to do is clock him in the 40, and then I know what his speed is.
Interesting.
Why did you allow him to do that? Now other people think they can participate in fact.
Theo has added, Gretna's the true 2021 champ. Oh, it looks like Gretna bias for Theo.
Oh, Theo's a Gretna truther.
Chance writes 1620 the exposed. Hard to argue. Hard to argue with that, John.